Hello, everybody, and welcome to Perspectives, our webinar series. We're talking all about accountability as a superpower today. I see folks filing into the Zoom, which is amazing. We're just going to give everybody a quick minute to join us. And while we're doing that, if you could tell us where you're dialing in from, but also today is National Name Yourself Day. If you could rename yourself for the day, what would your new name be? It's open to our panelists too, if you want to think about that. So, National Name Yourself Day. I've never heard of such a thing. I'm clearly going to go with Beyonce. That's going to be mine. But let's see what some of these answers are coming in. Holy cow. We got Arizona, Texas, Ohio. Yeah. What would you name yourself just for a day? Not stuck with it. Oh, I got a Gidget, not my real name. I love it. Lisa was going to be Eliza. I did not know that. How about that?
Yeah.
Very cool. Queen Elizabeth. I see Queen Elizabeth on in the chat. Dig it, dig it. A Stephanie. That's there he goes. Superwoman, straight up calling it. Love it. People who didn't hear the prompt are like, what is he talking about? Yeah, National Name Yourself Day. You get to pick a new name for a day. What would your new name be?
The
The
dude.
Dude. I love it. Awesome. These are some great names. Yeah, we'll just give one more quick minute for everybody to who's bouncing between meetings to come and join us for our webinar, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We'll respect the time of everybody who's showing up on time. Ivy. Got another Beyonce. Look at that. Oh, now it's getting confusing. I'll just pick another one. Got a Shira. Kangaroo. The kangaroo. I like it. I like it. All right. I could do this all day, but I'm not going to. I'm going to instead say welcome again, everyone, to the Perspectives webinar series. Accountability as a superpower. Accountability is a really hot topic, which is why we've assembled an amazing panel for you today. I'm going to introduce them. We're going to begin with Amberlynn Bryant. Amberlynn has over 2 decades of experience in team leadership, people development, and operations. She's a passionate advocate for purpose-driven workplace culture. She's the creator of Hire Like a Pro, which is a practical guide for building dream teams with intention. And her superpower lies in designing systems that reflect a company's soul, where people feel seen, heard, and empowered to grow. Amberlynn, thank you so much for being on our panel today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Super excited.
Going to be great. And next, we'll move to Lisa Perez. Lisa I. Perez is on the mission of transforming the human in human resources. She is a USA Today bestselling author and the founder and president of human resources consulting company HBL Resources, Inc. And she's also the creator of National Management Training Week. She's recognized throughout her 30-plus year HR career, including 2 2020 American Business Awards, Silver Stevie Awards for Entrepreneur of the Year, and Human Resources Professional of the Year. And she attributes the success to her passion for people and her desire to give back to her community. Lisa, it's wonderful to see you again. Thanks for being on the panel.
Likewise, Matt. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we have Sarah Ohannesson. Sarah is the textbook type A corporate ladder climber who realized it's nearly impossible to exist in the professional world unscathed by the brushes of burnout. She started a business so productive, then co-founded another super productive. Using her COAT, that's C-O-A-T, productivity system, she helped reduce turnover and disengagement by empowering teams to think about a neuro-inclusive approach to productivity. Sarah, wonderful to see you again as well, all the way from Orlando, where we last saw one another. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, we're going to switch over to just a tiny little bit of housekeeping. I just want to confirm for everybody that, yes, the webinar will be emailed to you after. So if you want to share it or if you want to replay any of our panel's sage comments, you're welcome to do that. We are going to have an audience Q&A portion at the end, so you can use that Q&A feature within Zoom. I always say that if you put it in the chat, we might see it. Put it in the Zoom, we will see it. We'd love to have your questions for our panel at the end of the show. And you're going to want to stick around. You're going to get some of those bonus resources. Spoiler alert, you'll be getting Amberlynn's resource as well, as she just mentioned, Hire Like a Pro. All these kinds of great things from our panelists, and you'll get their contact information, and you'll get a preview of next month's webinar. So that's great for our housekeeping. Now, when we frame the topic today, all about accountability as a superpower, I pulled a couple of stats here. You can see that in a recent survey, 82% of respondents limited to no ability to hold others accountable successfully. That's a tremendous amount of self-awareness, but it's also clearly a problem. 91%, big number, talking about ranking the improving the ability to hold others accountable in an effective way, one of the top leadership development needs. So accountability is important, and we're not great at it. And you might think to yourself, well, what about the CEOs? They're probably really good at this stuff too. I'll ask Rachel to give us a click here. And we find that 18% of CEOs said holding people accountable is their biggest weakness too. It's not easy, even at the highest level. And you can see that 15% of CEOs struggle with letting go of underperformers. So again, when accountability gets away and you know you have to take an action, that's kind of too late. So there's clearly an important topic for us today. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next, which is our audience poll. And we're going to have a link for you in the chat, so you can just click on the link. Or if you've got one of those magic phones, you can point your camera at that QR code and go to our Menti, where we've got a couple of quick questions for you. And the question that we have first is a multiple choice, choosing one. You can see on the screen. How do most managers in your organization approach accountability conversations? The first answer, I should say, is avoidance. They just don't have them. How about critical versus being constructive? They're a little overly harsh, but they're not necessarily as helpful as they might think they are. Inconsistently, kind of not really sure what you're going to get on a given day. How about formally? They wait for those 360s, those annual reviews, the performance review cycle, as opposed to in the moment just being direct and calling out what they're seeing. Or the last one, which is they're balanced. They're pretty good at it. They share expectations. They hold the standard, but they also take the opportunity for growth. They help people see where they can get better, right? So balanced. So we'll let these results pile in, and I'll ask the panelists too. What do you think? And any surprises here from what we're seeing?
No surprises here.
Yeah, avoidance.
Avoidance, yeah. Unfortunately, I think we saw that in some of the data too. I'll tell you,
That one shot up quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It was like right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. Yep.
Yeah.
No
I think,
surprises. But
yeah,
I was surprised by the 90% not, saying that it's a strength of theirs. That was a huge number. That surprised me that it was that many.
Yeah, well, I think there might be a little bit of a, yeah. So, and it varies. I think a lot of times you don't necessarily know what you are. You think a lot of managers probably think, no, I'm great at holding people accountable. And the people are like, no, that's not true. Yeah, not the way you do it. I'm a little surprised about the formal versus being direct. I think that I have a military background. We used to see that a lot, where people would almost hide behind the performance management systems to say, this is my opportunity to give the criticism, and then I'm not necessarily the bad person. But I think this is great. Fabulous data. Let's go on to our next Menti. It's a little bit more open-ended in that fact that it is open-ended. What's the biggest obstacle managers face when holding employees accountable? So anything at all, just type in your response. I'll call them out as I see them on the screen a little bit. This really helps us understand as a panel sort of what you're seeing, what you're coming in. We see timing, fear of confrontation, lack of documentation, time, a lot of time. We're so busy. Who's got time to help people get better, right? That's a little scary. Lack of EQ. Yeah, emotional intelligence. One of the #1 leadership demands of the future is EQ.
Yeah.
Don't have a formal process. Fear of quitting. Like, oh, geez, if I give them a hard time, what if they quit on me, right? Yeah, that's a great one. Unhappy reactions. Sure. Yeah. Backlash. Yeah, lots of that. A lot of lack of documentation showing up. Don't know how to have the conversation. Do I have to go straight to a PIP, or like what's going to happen here, right? Difficult conversations, employees leave. Yeah. Understanding how to give feedback without damaging the relationship. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah. And let's give a little grace here and say that it's not easy. We don't necessarily come up with these capabilities just as humans in our natural upbringing. I think it's true in our grade school experiences all the way through, collegiate into the workplace. This isn't a natural thing to do, to hold someone accountable and have that confrontational conversation sometimes. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the panel and talking all about it. So thanks again for bringing all this insight through this poll. We'll go back to the presentation just for one more quick slide. I wanted to show the talent optimization framework. We always talk about how we can't pass from business strategy to business results without going through the people part and getting that right. How do we design winning teams, hire top talent, inspire people to greatness, and diagnose people problems so we can get them fixed? In this case, I've highlighted design and inspire. Design is all around teams. How do we hold teams accountable? How do we set the expectations clearly, define the standards, and also still build team relationships? And then inspire, which is all about the manager and the one-on-one relationship with that direct report, or two peers, coworkers who are at the same level, if you will, in an organization. How do you provide constructive criticism and hold accountability when it's at the same level? That also lives within Inspire in this framework. Okay. So with that, we're going to come into our panel questions. And Amber Lynn, I'm going to ask you to get us started with this one. And my first question is, what are the manager behaviors that really demonstrate that manager's ability to hold employees accountable? Basically, what does good look like?
Yeah. I would say first you have to have a culture of creating a culture of a safe space where people feel like we can have those kind of communication. But once they're really being clear with the expectations and knowing what it looks like to do your job well, I think that's important. So as a manager, you usually have the skills down yourself, hopefully, if you're managing employees. And so really understanding what those skill set is, what it looks like to do a good job at that job, and then setting KPIs and having real standards there. But clarity I would say is the biggest thing, but also leading by example. I honestly feel like I don't preach the management situation. I love teaching people how to become leaders because again, it's providing a space where people can actually feel comfortable and come to you and they can look at you as somebody that they respect. And so, yeah, I would say definitely communication with clear expectations and a culture where feedback is not a weapon.
Love that. It's one of those things where, hey, I need you to be on time. It's like, well, you just got here. Like, what are you talking about? You got to lead by example, right? Sarah,
Totally.
what do you think? Same question to you. Like, what does good look like from these managers then it comes to holding employees accountable?
Well, I have to share an experience I actually had this morning, which has come up many, many times, unfortunately. But this morning, it really hit me in prep for this conversation, and it just happened in the poll there, where people were saying, "I don't have time to do this." And I think one of the common misconceptions I run into is if you're a manager, part of the time that it takes to manage people is to deal with this essentially and to have some of these conversations. And so often they think, well, this is taking me away from doing my work or what I have to do. And I think there's a big misconception on behavior in terms of this takes time to manage people. And that's a big part of your job as a manager. And I think so often we think I'll manage between the cracks of the meetings, in those little pockets of time I have during the day. And I would love for people to flip that and say, no, this is a core of what I'm responsible for and what I have to do and making sure we've got enough time to do that.
Love that. So making time and seeing a manager actually make the time to provide that feedback, whether it's reinforcing something they saw that was good or perhaps correcting something that they need done a little bit differently. And Lisa, to round us out, same question for you. What does it look like when managers are doing a good job of holding people accountable?
Yeah, I think to tie into what both these amazing women have said, right? The consistency in that follow through, providing the culture, the cadence, the check-in points that creates that as a natural thing to do, right? This is just how we do things, because when you hold a space for that, you know that there's going to be that opportunity to communicate. It can allow for, those areas where you're holding accountable, but also for coaching, but also for recognition, right? And reinforcing the expectations that you're holding that space and it's expected, right? It is part of just the culture and the cadence of how you manage your teams.
Yeah, that's a great point. But Lisa, I'm going to keep you in the hot seat for a second. Let's flip the coin here and say, what are the circumstances or what are some of the demonstrated behaviors that really reinforce for you that a manager might be unable or unwilling really to have that type of tough conversation that we know that they need to have?
Yeah,
What
I
does that
think
look like?
you touched on it just a moment ago when you said that they have this fear of being the bad guy, right? I don't want to because I want them to like me, right? And they don't realize that managers who view accountability only as punitive, they're going to shy away from those important developmental opportunities. But when they do prepare themselves to have those areas, those conversations where we're highlighting areas of opportunity, I like to call it, then they're a well-respected manager as well. So, but I think that fear of being the fall guy, the bad guy, needs to be reversed in their minds to see how they can be the good guy by upskilling and, really holding their teams accountable.
Yeah, I think the environment too, the circumstances around a lot of the fear, and I saw that in the poll results too, where it's like, well, what if somebody quits? Well, if the job market, if the company's not doing well and already there's some grumbling happening, and now I'm going to pile on top of that, it feels risky at that point. So I think that, yeah, that perception of the bad guy is, especially for certain personality types, like mine, it's a little bit challenging.
And it's how we say what we say.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think also the expectations, but Amber Lynn, I'll ask you the same question. So when you think about somebody, you can tell a manager, you're like, this person's either, they don't know how, or maybe they're holding back. Like, what does that look like? in your experience?
Yeah, and what I've seen is sometimes it's if it doesn't come as native, if you're not naturally somebody that loves interpersonal skills and loving to talk to people and help them grow and that kind of thing, I see some avoidance and even wanting to hold those one-on-ones, right? Like scheduling one-on-ones, for instance, is something that I preach all the time and do it from the beginning, every week, every 2 weeks, whatever it looks like. But make it a non-negotiable, like that has to happen, unless obviously you have to move it. But I see some of those managers, though, that don't love the conflict, aren't so great at the interpersonal stuff, pushing those meetings back, waiting a whole nother month beforehand, or even when you do have those one-on-ones or those performance reviews, not following through on the action items that you guys decided on in those. So really just the lack of follow through and the lack of being intentional and making sure that one-on-ones in those conversations are just non-negotiable.
Yeah, people in the audience wouldn't know it, but Amber Lynn, I met you the first time because you were on my podcast and we talked about PI Perform and we talked about the importance of one-on-ones. And you took me to school back then as saying, you got to be having these regular one-on-ones.
Yeah.
I can imagine that if an employee is like, I never have a meeting and now I have a meeting request with Bob, my manager, this isn't going to go well. Like that's not the time to have the one-on-one is when you have something constructive to share at that point.
Yeah, 100%.
Hugely impossible. Well, I think that on our call today, we really work hard to empower HR, to really share our best practices, to talk about how HR can equip managers to do things that they're not doing, and we need them to do them. We understand that. And so, Sarah, I'll ask you to get us started with thinking about HR's role here. People who are on the call, how can HR help managers really develop these accountability skills when they may not come naturally to them otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think giving certainly education is helpful and opportunity to practice some of these conversations. But one of the things I always go back to, and I do a lot of work in the productivity space, is thinking about, are we clear on what we're doing and why it matters? And that really comes through on so many different levels of the organization, because making sure that managers know what are we doing? Like, do we all have clarity on what metrics are we measuring? Are we clear on the goals here? And why does that work matter? If we are going to have a conversation with someone, why are we doing that? What's the intended outcome of that conversation? And hopefully, to Amber Lynn's point, you're being consistent with it, certainly. And then the other piece I like to pay a lot of attention to, I do a lot of work in the neurodiversity space, is to think about the different brains on our team. And starting to educate people more that, one, there are different brains on your team and how they may respond differently to the same conversation just because their brain is perceiving it as different from the next person. And so I think for HR to continue education in that space. So one, we know that there's different brains on our team, but as leaders, we know what we can do with some of those different brains on our team and how we might need to adjust our messaging accordingly.
I love that. Love that. Yeah, we've always, I, for example, was trained a long time ago to think about different personalities and how we show up in the workplace. But I think you're really taking that to the next level when you think about neurodiversity specifically and how we have different brains. You're in a team meeting with lots of different brains, and you have to recognize that not everything you say or how you choose to say it or how you may prefer to say it is going to land on everybody equally.
Yeah.
That's powerful stuff. But Lisa, I'll ask you too, you spend so much time educating HR leaders and through all the different great works that you do. How do you see HR's role in helping these managers, sort of get better at something we really need them to get better at?
Yeah, it really comes down to training, but the training industry spends billions and billions of dollars and we don't see the needle moving, right? So it's not just training, but holding our teams accountable to put that training in place, right? You always hear knowledge is power. I don't subscribe to that. Knowledge and action is power, right? And I know we can all agree. I see that the heads nodding, right? So providing frameworks like, SBI, situation, behavior, impact, all of those things, but making sure that our managers are actually doing what we train them to do. And we as HR professionals have to model it ourselves. When that manager comes to us and has that need, has that sticking point, needs that coaching, we have to model that coaching and accountability as well, right? We have to have that message that says accountability is a form of caring for your employees, caring for your organization and each one of them to build their capacities. And I think sometimes HR falls a little bit short when it comes to that. So
love that. And Amber Lynn, same question for you. HR, thinking about how we help these managers.
Yeah, well, in my particular situation, I'm super lucky right now because I have a team of 50-ish mission-driven employees that I get to work with every single day. But so I play a really hands-on approach. So when I am training somebody, I'm going through culture training. I'm literally running through the surveys with them, going through each question, kind of setting expectations on why we're even doing these surveys in the first place and what kind of reactions and feedback we want to be getting and giving to our people, because we go both ways, right? And then also really being able to we do one step forward where we do a one-on-one meeting after their quarter reviews, and I am in all of those meetings. Now, I know that's not scalable. That's the next big order of business for me, is to scale 250 employees and be able to still keep high touch. But in the moment, it's really being hands-on and being able to give that real feedback, that coaching, that love, that support, those resources right in real time for people as well. So yeah, for me, I would say that.
The other thing that I've really appreciated, because I'm on the business side, but when I've had tremendous trust for all the HR providers who've worked so hard on me as a flawed manager product. And I always appreciated when they demonstrated a level of curiosity. And if I say, well, I'm having trouble with this person just not, doing things the way that I'd like, and they'd say something like, well, show me what expectations you've set. And I'm like, oh, well, I just kind of told them. I don't. They're like, wait a second. Some people need things written down. You have to be more clear. You're not, setting the standard that way. So it's really something that I think that partnership, and I've heard each of you say that in different ways, is that partnership between HR saying, I'm curious, I want to help you, but let's unwind this a little bit. Take more of that consulting hat to say, how do we land in this situation where your employee is not being as accountable as you'd like? Not just assume that the employee is automatically the problem. The manager very well could be the problem. And let's shift our attention to a little bit of manager training. So Amberlynn, maybe I could ask you this one. When you think about manager training, like, okay, we've now committed, we've said we got a problem here, or an opportunity. I'll use Lisa's term. We have an opportunity here to help our managers get better. What should we consider when it comes to that training?
Yeah, so I think that, well, one thing what tools that I use, I think tools are a good way to start. And so really learning first, we use the PI as well. So using PI and really getting to the root of how somebody communicates and kind of how they need to hear something. So we'll do some training on that usually, and usually how maybe that manager and that person work together so we can communicate the best way. But then really breaking it down. Again, it's through KPIs. What are the actual skills? I'm going to take the emotion out of this, and we're going to look at what actually needs to improve, come up with a game plan with my manager, and then be able to either create a performance plan or that one-on-one meeting with some actionable 1, 2, 3 steps that need to be done to see improvement. So yeah, again, for me, it's always going to be more of that hands-on, get in there, show how it can be done, but always being curious and understanding the whole person.
It sounds like when you say that 1, 2, 3, the step by step, I could see where that would be really palatable to managers, because they tend to like things that are rational, that are clear and stepwise in that way. Is that something specific that you're doing with them, is making sure that they understand? It sounds like.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, there's always actionables, and it's always very solid and very measurable. And then we take it one step forward, and we use the PI perform as well. So then we can keep track of those goals, and without it being micromanaging either, right? Because you can set reminders for those to pop up for these people to be able to follow through on their own time, and then whenever that next meeting is, we can follow up. So yeah, big fan of tools and practical ways to get the message across.
The older I get, the more I appreciate automated reminders. I don't know if my brain is just too full. But Sarah, I'll ask you the same question. Now we're in this manager training mindset. What do we want to make sure that we include as either examples or components of what that training needs to have in it?
Yeah, and I love everything Amberlynn said. One of the things that I do with my business partner Jeff is we teach teams what we call a user guide. And so what that is if you think about anytime you get an appliance, you get in a refrigerator, it comes with a manual that says, this is how you use this. And if it seems to shut down a little bit, here's what to do about it. Here's some troubleshooting, essentially. And so we came up with this concept of thinking about, if we're working with someone, imagine if we could hand them essentially our user manual. And so I'm new to working with Lisa. I say, hey, Lisa, welcome to the team. Here's my user guide. And without having to be diagnosed in any way or anything too formal, it's just a self-reflection exercise where I say, this is when I'm my best. This is how I like to work. I like short emails. I like long emails. I like all the details. I like a color-coded spreadsheet. It's really just sharing some of those basic preferences. And it's not that Lisa's going to do it every single time she works with me, but it's just an awareness of, Lisa, to get the best out of me, these are some kind of inside tips on how to do that. And then ideally, Lisa does the same. So one of the workshops that we do is help teams create their user guides. And it's been really, really eye-opening because it's relatively easy. It's very simple for teams to do. And as new people are getting hired to the organizations, we can share these user guides with people. And for us, that's just been a tremendous training tool.
I love that. And no employee is going to have a user guide that says, give me ambiguous tasks and keep me in the dark until you're really mad at me and then explode at me in front of other people. Like that's not going to show up in anybody's user guide, even if that's what happens on the floor. Yeah. It's such an awesome way too, to see that this is one of the most powerful yet sort of, I don't know, transformative things that I had as an experience was understanding that not everyone's just like me. When I was a junior manager, I thought everybody just needed to hear things that are, think about things the way I had to. It's really challenging when you have 5 different people on the team and they have 5 different ways that they want to be managed by you. But guess what? That's what you signed up for, right? You have to tailor as best you can your leadership to match their user guides. You can't treat the refrigerator like your microwave, right?
Exactly.
Oh, wait a second.
And it's not that it's going to work perfectly every time. I think that's really important to say, but it's just about this awareness of, if I know that Lisa hates color-coded spreadsheets, maybe I should just summarize it and shoot her a quick text about it. If she loves it, let's go. Let's make multiple tabs on that spreadsheet. But it's really about helping people and getting the best out of them, knowing how they like to see and receive information.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, round us out on this manager training. Like, what does it got to have? What are the must-haves?
I mean, it's been a while since I have dug into the PI assessment, so I've got to engage with that, because much to the conversation here, we do the same, right, with DISC, and that is the user guide. I like things bullet points, tell me what time it is, not how to make the watch kind of thing, and so I really, really love that. But I think also that emotional intelligence piece that we mentioned earlier is critical, right? Not just being aware of others' emotional intelligence and how we relate to them, but our own, right? What triggers you when that employee is getting ready to have this conversation, so that we can really be self-assured and create those spaces of psychological safety, right? We don't train that stuff. I'm sorry, raise your hand if you learned that in college, right? None of us. And communication dynamics, all of those things. And I'll say it, the soft skills that are critically important for today's managers, right? That's my wheelhouse. That's where I thrive. I was super excited, Sarah, when were you saying, give me the guide on how to work with me? Absolutely. That is critically important, because that's how we can best relate to one another, right? It's that, do unto others kind of thing. No, do unto others, not as I would have them do, but how they want to be done to them, right? So it changes that framework. So, but always with that human connection, that emotional intelligence, and that who I am innately really has to be part of that training, so that I'm now aware of how best to connect and build rapport with each person on my team.
I'll extend that grace a little bit more to the managers. I think, we put a lot on their plates and we expect a lot of them.
And then don't train them.
We don't train them necessarily, and they don't have just automatically high levels of self-awareness. I'm fortunate to be able to teach graduate level leadership at Boston College, and I teach self-awareness specifically. Of course, I give them the PI, but I also give them emotional intelligence inventories, values in action, lots of things to try to help them understand, here's who you are. And it's transformative for them to go through and say, oh my gosh, I never really thought about it or had this sort of relationship. It explains so much about what I'm seeing at work. So I think if we can just get more of that self-awareness into the manager training in the context, as we're talking about today, of accountability, it's understanding about why does it tweak me so much when somebody does something a certain way and it's an affront to me because it makes me look bad in front of my boss or whatever it is. You understand where all that stuff comes from. So I love the fact that we're talking about that manager training in that way. But I'll move us forward to something else that showed up in both the Menti as well as some of our conversation, was around psychological safety. And I think a lot of times managers, again, without proper training or without the instincts, don't create an environment where there is psychological safety. So let's say that as a manager, I haven't done a great job with that. Is it still effective for me to try to hold people accountable? Is it even fair for me to try to hold people accountable if I haven't established a culture of safety locally for my team, let's say? Sarah, I want to ask you first. What do you think of something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I ideally would try to get it back as soon as possible. And one of the ways that we like to teach this is to think about, I call it sitting on the same side of the table. And for me, what that means is even if we've had a misstep, maybe we aren't really in alignment anymore, that psychological safety has been lost a little bit. One way I think teams can get it back is to think about me and you. So instead of me versus you, it's me and you together versus the problem, whatever problem we're trying to solve. And so I think that shifts things. So now we're not against each other, we're not in opposition, but now we're sitting on the same side of the table. We're looking at that problem and we're trying to come at it from the same angle. And I hope that that would be a way for people to really tangibly and tactily let's reignite some of that psychological safety, because it's obviously very critical. But I also understand when it's lost, it's hard to regain that, certainly.
Right. Where did the love go? Can we get the love back? Let's do
Yeah,
that.
it's hard.
I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
Amber Lynn, same question. I'm a team leader. I haven't done a great job, haven't prioritized safety, but now all of a sudden I have accountability issue. Like, where do I go from here?
Yeah, I think that in some ways it still is the employee's responsibility to show up at a high standard in some way, right? Like you knew somewhat of what you were getting into when you took this position, and there's still some level of what it looks like to do a good job from you. And so I think there is still that personal accountability that all people should have. But on the other side of it, I think that typical culture or a lot of workplace cultures do weaponize feedback, and they do use it as ways to threaten people, scare people into submission, those kinds of things. And so I think in some ways, I think you still have to be able to show up and know your standards and what you have for the position. But I also think that it's hard to hold somebody accountable if you are not providing the framework for what it even looks like to do the job right. And if that safety isn't there, that really affects people's real livelihoods. If you lose your job, if you even have just conflict with somebody all day, every day, we spend a lot of time at work. And so it just takes a lot of the quality of life away. And so, for me, I would say, as a manager, obviously you got to find those ways to get back in there to get some safety going. And if not, then you need some training.
You sparked a thought for me too, Lise. I'm sorry, Amberlyn. And when it's thinking about this situation where the most reprehensible behavior that I see is when the organization says, hey, we don't have a lot of dough, or we don't have a lot of room for promotions. And so now people are going to start getting tough feedback, because otherwise, if they're asking for a promotion that I can't give them, if ask for a raise I can't give them, you're like, this is so debilitating, because you're actually eroding any safety that might have been held by other people around you, because eventually, these things get out. And
Yeah.
and it's awful to see something like that happening. And hopefully it doesn't happen a ton. I have my suspicion it happens a lot more than we think, but it's something we have to be mindful of. And Lisa, again, round us out when it comes to lack of psychological safety.
Yeah.
For myself as a manager on the team, what do I do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because, psychological safety is a prerequisite, right? We have to have that to be able to have accountability, but that doesn't mean we should fail to hold them accountable. And I'm of the opinion of, if that has faltered, if I don't have that yet, then maybe get a senior leader, HR, a mentor, come alongside you to model and ensure that accountability still results, right? Maybe that's a group conversation or a three-way conversation, because we still have to hold them accountable as we start to rebuild that trust and that psychological safety, right? We can't just say, oh, well, I can't do it now until they trust me again, or until they feel psychologically safe. No, we still have to do that as we build back up to that trust and that psychological safety. And maybe, like I said, that's a senior leader coming alongside you to help with that accountability conversation, because it's critically important, because if one starts to falter, the whole team will start to falter, and we can't have that.
Well, it's good news to hear that we can kind of repair both at the same time. We don't have to do them serially. We don't have to wait and say, well, I guess people are just going to get away with some stuff for a while.
Concurrent.
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
do it concurrent. But and
Sure.
and I'll keep you on the answer spot here, in the sense of we're on a Zoom call today. We've got people coming from all over the place. Remote and hybrid work, in varying degrees, it's going to be here to stay to some extent. So the question is, does accountability and holding people accountable look any different when we're in this remote world or a hybrid world versus in person?
Yeah, I'm on the fence there, because I don't think so, right? The tools that we use to hold people accountable might change, right? But if I'm instituting, a project management tool, right, it has the way to have clear, accountable expectations, deliverables, outcomes, due dates. We use those organizationally, whether you're in California or in Florida or at the corporate office, the processes don't change. So I think having clear outlined expectations, ensuring that the deliverables are, happening and that the outcomes that we are expecting are being delivered. I don't know that it changes any. Maybe the tools do, but not the method in which we do it. So check-ins over, Zoom are just as much as me knocking on the door and saying, hey, do you got a minute? So I don't think that it really changes with the remote work, just how we go about doing it, I think.
Sarah, same for you. Templates, tools in your business too, I take it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, so I couldn't agree with Lisa more. I think COVID was shining a light on some of the managerial practices that might have needed to have a tune-up, essentially. And what COVID did give us was some of these amazing tools. So, my team is certified. We do a lot of work in Asana, and it's a wonderful task project management software that we help teams onboard to their organizations. And what we were seeing during that time, it's almost like this out of sight, out of mind thing happens. So because I'm not seeing you, I'm just going to pretend I know what's going on or assume everything's good. So to Lisa's point, I think the clarity around what's expected is more important than ever. Now, what's great coming out of the pandemic is we've got some awesome tools to make this a lot easier for us. And so using those tools, so you're not taking even more of your time. Back to, people saying this takes so much of our time. The tools can help save you a ton of time. So you're still being efficient, but certainly you're still able to follow up with people. It's mission critical.
Love that. I always say that transparency creates trust, and that's what those tools do. They help
Yeah,
everybody.
it's right there for you. Yeah.
But Amberlynn, I want to ask you a slightly different question, which is now let's talk about the difference between individuals and groups. If I'm holding a person accountable, is it any different than when I'm holding a kind of a collective assignment, like a cross-functional team? Are there any differences between how I need to approach what I'm doing there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, it's just really breaking down and understanding what is needed. So understanding from a company perspective what each department is responsible for and what they need to do, and then really breaking down those positions. So like I know in our company, we've done a lot of work on being really clear about each role's KPIs and like really understanding measurable ways to see if that person is doing good at their job. So we hold KPIs for departments, and then we also hold them as well for individuals. So just really separating the two, but understanding how they work in the bigger scheme of things, I think is helpful in accountability.
Well, that's good. There's a lot of carryover. It might be done on a different scale, but it's like I'm hearing a lot of best practices will translate in both directions. Lisa, I want to ask you a little bit of a different question, which is this notion that inevitably, I've been through enough unconscious bias training to know that we can't eliminate bias. And when I think about holding people accountable, it really creates this, unfortunately, a fertile ground for that to kind of creep in. So from a manager's perspective, what can we do to sort of minimize, because we can't eliminate it, the likelihood that either some sort of judgment, some sort of, well, that's not how I would have done it, or just outright bias kind of gets into our feedback cycle when we're holding others accountable?
Yeah, great question. So I think that it's important to establish what is the performance indicator, right? I use an example of, the typist. Yes, I'm aging myself here, but if you're supposed to finish 100 pages by the end of the day, then the 100 pages is 100 pages, right? Whether you're Jim or Joe or Jane or, whatever, the performance data doesn't lie, right? And sharpening our saw through unconscious bias training and inclusive leadership training is important, right? But I think we also have to conduct that bias check, asking ourselves, am I making this decision on facts or familiarity? Am I, would this behavior be the same if it came from such and such? I was having a conversation with a colleague, and they're going through caregiving in the workplace, and the husband's parent is getting to that age where are they going to bring them home and watch them, or put them somewhere to be better cared for. And I said to that person, I said, I got one question for you. What if that was your mother? And suddenly it's like, ooh, okay. So I think that gut check is really important. What if it was so-and-so? Would I be still having the same perspective, right? And so I think that bias check is a game changer.
I like that a lot. And Amberlynn, I want to pay off on something I said a little bit earlier, which is that we have to find a way to strike this balance between enforcing expectations, but also demonstrating empathy. What sort of tip do you have for our managers on how they can do that?
I think genuinely caring about people, genuinely being curious about who they are, how they operate. I also think kind of taking the emotions of whatever the trigger is or whatever's wrong or not going right out of it. And again, I like to look at the person as a whole human, right? Like, and so really genuinely giving caring about that person and approaching the situation in that way. I would say that that's how we lead with empathy for sure, in my development. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, and I think that Sarah, I want to get your take on this one too, because I saw it show up in the chat as well. We talked about gender differences. Or we saw in generational differences, I should say, as well as gender. And we have talked about personality differences. But you said a bit also about neurodiversity, and I think it's something that increasingly we need to be having the conversation. How, as a manager, again, we talked about different brains, but do you have any more sort of advice or counsel you can give us on holding people accountable in this era of understanding how to be understanding and appreciative of neurodiversity as a contributing factor?
Yeah, I think what's really important here is a key takeaway is that every brain is different and every person is different. And so what that means it's not appropriate necessarily for me to hold Lisa accountable the same way I hold Amberlynn accountable as I hold myself accountable. And I think what's really an opportunity is for HR and for managers to think about, what does this person need to be held accountable? Certainly, I'm an advocate for being accountable. But what does that mean for the different people? Because one of the things we always ask clients is, what's that thing that's going to motivate you? What's that thing that's going to get you to take action? Now, for some people, it's, I told somebody I was going to do it. And when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. For other people, it's the deadline. For other people, it's the urgency. They like that kind of fire, the action factor. So it's different for everyone, is my point. And so learning about what's going to be really a key motivator for the different people on your team, because what's going to spark them into action and keep them accountable is actually going to be different for everybody. So it's a huge opportunity to get curious, ask, learn about the team. I think we're never done learning about the people that we work with, and that's really our opportunity.
So good. And I want to before I move us on to the Q&A, I want to ask Lisa, put you on the hot seat here. Can you give me a worked example, like exactly what does it sound like as a manager? What's the actual phrase that you might say that would be an example of holding somebody accountable? Like, what does good look like in terms of like the phraseology?
I love this question because, I am all about making it actionable, right? I remember that first time I had to write someone up, right? Or correct performance or what have you. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I start this conversation, right? But maybe it might look like something like, I want to be clear about the expectations for your role, right? As you know, one of our values, right? Tie it to organizational values is striving for excellence in everything we do. And that includes showing up consistently, delivering on the expectations of our responsibilities. So let's review what success looks like so that we can ensure we're fully supporting you, but also getting there, right?
I love
Something
that.
like that.
Yeah, you started by anchoring in the why, right? The big picture, then you zoom down to all the way to specifics. That was
and
good.
I always tie it to organizational values, mission, and vision, right? That's critical to tie that in.
I dig it. I dig it. Well, we're about to enter my favorite part of the show, which is the Q&A. Audience, we're getting ready for the Q&A portion. You can go to that Q&A button within Zoom. And while you're getting your questions together for our panel, I just want to also throw a link in the chat. And it's just a recognition that companies are using talent optimization to drive better business results through better people practices. So if you're interested in learning more about our sponsor, Predictive Index, and some of the work that they're doing, either as an organization on the client side or to become a partner, one of our consultants, whether you have experience or not, just use the appropriate button in the Zoom, and we will love to follow up with you. All right, Q&A time. Here we go. So the first question, what advice do you have for HR professionals who work for organizations where HR is not respected as a strategic partner, but is rather seen in a more transactional role? So here we've got our beloved people professionals, but they're not being treated so great. And worse yet, managers are complaining that their people just won't be accountable. Like, how do you make that leap? What do you think? Who wants to weigh in on that one first?
I'd love to jump in on that
Go ahead
one.
and start, then we'll see. Yeah.
Having been through that journey of getting that seat at the table, sometimes we've got to really bring our big girl and big boy panties on, right? And make business cases. I think sometimes HR professionals don't have the ability or don't take the time to articulate the business case behind the recommendations that they're making, right? It's not just because HR said so. There's a law that aligns here. There's a compliance piece. There's a key performance indicator that says engagement is faulting. And sorry, I had pop-ups going all over the place. And and that engagement is tied to what, right? If we can articulate the need for what it is we're looking to do, right? Whether it's strategy, new technology, a mentorship program, whatever it is, that we make that shift and go from transactional to big picture strategic thinking, because we can articulate what it is we're talking about a little bit better. That's how I've had that success in making that shift that says, I'm gonna have a seat at this table, move over and let me show you why and how.
I like that. And I think it also, the notion that there is an accountability issue in keeping with the theme of the webinar means that there's a business problem. So I think using that as an opportunity to get that strategic footing, it might be the blessing in disguise, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Amberlynn, I want to have you weigh in on this next one, which is, how do you hold managers accountable for actually performing the people management aspect of their role? So it's one thing to say, my people aren't responsible or accountable for the technical bits. You're like, okay, but you've got a job to do too. How do you actually hold managers accountable to lead people? You use that term yourself, leading versus managing.
So for us, we have the hierarchies, right? Like everybody has a supervisor in some way, shape, or form. Everybody's responsible for somebody. And so we, from the top down, we lead by example. And so we, like, for instance, our chief of staff is the manager of all of the heads of the departments. And so he leads by example, managing them, setting goals with them, meeting with them weekly, and then also doing the quarter review. So it trickles down all the way to the entry-level positions within our company. So just making sure, again, that we're leading by example and we're trailblazing the way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And Sarah, I want to pose this next one for you, which is, how do you suggest is the best way to go about starting a culture of feedback? So how do we start to make this much more common and just kind of ingrained in the fabric? It's an area where our management team has always struggled, and it makes my job as the HR director very challenging.
This term has come up a few times, and it's consistency. And thinking about, I think if one day we read a book, we listen to this, and tomorrow we go and they're like, all right, everybody, here's what's happening. People are very thrown off by that. And so I think it's really about how can you consistently, and to Amberlynn's point, your actions have to align with what you're trying to accomplish, and doing that consistently. Now it's not strange when it happens. It's not shocking for people. It's just something that we do all the time. And again, I know that culture shift can take some time to occur, but I think for me, what I'm always working with clients on is those small wins over time that are going to lead to a bigger impact. So start small, but just be very, very consistent with those small wins to helping your team.
Drop by drop.
Can I also add that I would say just being transparent and open about that all the time. Like even today, for instance, we had a wrap up of what happened in our quarter review, and we had a whole company meeting and brought up again that, thank you so much for the quarter review. Everybody did a great job. I've been really working with my managers over the last year to train them on how to have good conversations in their quarter review. So really just thanking them, but then being transparent and honest about, like, this is the culture, this is who we are. And actually, we used an example of somebody that we had to let go. And because of our performance cadence, we were able to catch the red flags, work with that person, but then unfortunately found it wasn't a good thing. But we're able to use that as an example to say, hey, when we give real good feedback, like, it's easier for us to come in and help support you than it is to pretend like everything's fine and then you fail and then termination or something like that happens afterwards, because the feedback from this person we let go was, man, I wish I was more honest about where I was having a hard time. But for him, it was a new culture. He wasn't used to this kind of transparency and was afraid to tell us. So
yeah, it's an adjustment for sure. I like that. This next one, I'll try this one and see how we do. It says, we use PI. We talk about PI often. Our VP likes to take a cookie cutter approach to a lot of things. What could one of the top managers or all the managers help her to understand that we're all different. We all have different brains, that we need a different manager approach, manager to manager. My recommendation is in the design product, in the design module, there's a team discovery tool. And it allows you to take those results, those behavioral results for people that aren't PI people. You're basically taking the behavioral drives of what people really need and expect at work. And you can put the entire team on one grid. And you can see how far apart we are, where we're spread, where some people are concentrated, maybe have a similar style that they appreciate, but others might have a wildly different style. I've been in this business a long time. I haven't seen a tool that really explains so much detail all in one place about different team dynamics and differences team member to team member. So that's what I would recommend is start with the management team, put them all on the grid and say, wow, see this? And oh, it explains so much. And then when the light bulbs go off saying, how do we start to change those styles? We'll go back to another question here for the panel. I'll just throw this out to whoever wants to jump on it. Going back to the original question about HR not being seen as strategic partners, what advice do you have when you have to continue to show the case even after you've had successes, but HR is still gate kept in the organization? So we're just having a hard time being seen as strategic. We've had some successes. We tried. How do we just continue to make that case that we're strategic and we have a lot of value to add beyond the transactional?
If I was the one that felt that way and nobody was helping me, then I would just do it. Like I would just jump in there and start creating, which essentially is kind of what happened with the company that I'm in now. Because even if it's not your title, but you feel very strongly about it, maybe like for me, I'm a people and culture director. I'm not HR because I'm not just the legal stuff and all that. I like the culture part, right? Yeah. So, I totally lost my train of thought again, Matt.
Yeah. So we're having a hard time going from
Welcome to
transactional
my
to
world.
strategic. What do you think?
So just, showing up that way and leading that way, or finding other managers that feel the same way as you and like working together to find ways to create a better culture, a better experience, more feedback with as managers, and work together to change the culture yourself if it's not going to come from legal and HR.
You're creating that groundswell. I like that a lot. Yeah, very much. The other thing, I think a lot of education is needed. We have to help our executives and all managers understand every business is a people business. Yeah. It is the last remaining competitive differentiator. We've got to get the people part right. And top talent always has a choice. If we don't, then they're not going to be around forever. They may be stuck there right now in a tough job market in many industries, but guess what? As soon as things open up, we don't want them leaving in droves. Now's our chance to really draw them close, right? Yeah. Last question, and then we're going to have some wrap up here. As someone who's been promoted from from a manager to someone who now manages the managers, what's the best way to transition into my new role of managing them? Sarah, what do you think? All of a sudden, yesterday we were all peers, but now I've been elevated, and they're experienced managers too. But I'm now in charge of them. Where do I begin?
I would think it's always appropriate to continue with that education. We're never done learning. We can always be better. We can always grow. So I would say have that open mindset that just because you got this promotion doesn't mean now you know everything. And what are your blind spots? What are your weaknesses? What training do you need to even elevate yourself further? And I think to have that open mindset of continual growth, continual improvement, you don't know everything. I think that mindset really sets us up for success and being open to what we don't know.
Yeah, I love managing. I've actually enjoyed managing managers more than even I did managing individual contributors, because there's a lot more of empathy. We understand one another, and it's a very powerful thing.
Matt, I would love to chime in there really quickly. The best onboarding and promote yourself book I've ever read, in addition, of course, to yours, Expanding the Circle,
thank you.
Was Michael Watkins' The First 90 Days. And one of the chapters is about promoting yourself and some strategies to do in that first 90 days that really are game changers. It used to be recommended reading for anybody onboarding in organizations where I was the VP of HR. So I would highly recommend that book because it will help you navigate that. And then, of course, if you don't already know and understand the stages of team development, right? Forming, norming, storming, all of that, right? You want to definitely do some training on that, because that's what's going to start happening as you engage in this new role. So just had to chime in there on those things because I've been there.
I'm so glad you did.
Yes, thank you.
All right, panelists. Well, thanks so much for that. I'm going to ask Rachel to bring back up the slides, and we're going to do some final housekeeping. We'll get everybody off to enjoy the rest of their day. So we've been talking a lot about accountability. We saw great questions in the chat. We didn't have time to get to them all, but if you want to continue the conversation, join me. We can have a mastermind session all about group coaching. This is a chance to come together with peers who are like-minded and to bring up those topics and receive some group coaching from myself and from the others who joined the call. So if you'd be interested in joining us, you can see that's going to be on April 23rd, I believe it was. And you don't just have to take my word for it. This is some of the feedback we got from the last month's session. So people really seem to be enjoying it. And we just want to hold space and create community for people to come together and talk about those things. We'll go on to the next slide, which is where to go from here. So we've got contact information for Amber Lynn, for Lisa, for Sarah. And you can see their LinkedIn is a great place to connect with us. You'll also get those links in the, I believe those will be in the chat. They'll also be in the follow-up. We'd love for you to follow us on LinkedIn. We have great shares. And also, if you have any questions specifically for one of our panelists or for myself, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. And speaking of takeaways, we've got several examples of things that our panelists have prepared just for you. And one of the examples from Amber Lynn is to be able to download that ebook she talked about earlier, which was Hire Like a Pro, so that you can build your dream team. And so that's, again, these links will be available to you tomorrow in the follow-up email. So just make a quick note to yourself if you want to check those out. Lisa's got a download of an ebook on how to create that culture of engagement with dozens of low-cost and no-cost ways to engage employees. So that's an ebook you're going to want to grab for yourself. Sarah's got a download for you about your guilt-free guide to saying no. Who doesn't need that? A guilt-free guide to saying no. And then for myself, I had last month's LinkedIn newsletter edition. I talk about why teams fail and how to make sure your team doesn't fail. So that would be something to check out as well. And we got two more slides for you. One, this is something new. You can see the new moniker there. I've been giving a lot of presentations to HR teams where I pride myself on being able to offer education, but also HR is going through some stuff right now. So I like to offer a quick pick-me-up and a boost for this. Yeah, I put a picture there. I had to specify, I'm the one at the left. The right one happens to be Tom Cruise. A lot of people get us confused, I think, because we both do our own stunts. But if you have a chance and you're interested, we've been getting a lot of good feedback on an empowering message for HR, an educational message, how to build that business case, how to be seen as more strategic. So I don't know what's going to happen. I have only so much availability, but that's something if you'd be interested in, would love to follow up with you to see if that's something that you might like. And then not quite last, but certainly not least, we have a book giveaway. We have a winner of the book giveaway this month. We have somebody who's going to be getting a book for us from me. I'll send you a signed copy. I'll get you that information here in just a bit. And then next, we've got a tip sheet. We created an accountability checklist for you. This is a fabulous resource that you can share with your managers because it has a self-assessment. They can go through and honestly, can I say that I do these things? And if there's anything they're partnering with you and saying, you know what, I'm not great at this item, so I didn't check it off, I'm a no instead of a yes, there's an improvement tip that you can give them some coaching on how to get to that next level. So you're going to get that download. You can just forward it to any of your managers, all your managers, put it in your Slack or your Microsoft Teams, get people the information that they need to be able to benefit from that. That would be an awesome thing to do. All right. And then we've got our final here, which is our webinar for next month. We have such a strong following month to month. We'll hope you join us next month. We're going to talk about from conflict to connection. It's all about difficult discussions. How do we actually use those tough conversations we need to have to actually strengthen relationships and not destroy relationships in the process? You can see that's going to be on Wednesday, May 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern time, our normal time on a Wednesday. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much to our panelists, Amber Lynn, Sarah, for Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us today. And thanks so much, of course, biggest thanks to our audience for joining us. And thanks to the Predictive Index, of course, for sponsoring us and making talent optimization dreams come true all over the web and all over the world. Thank you, team. Really appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you next month. Goodbye.